Hello everybody, welcome here at another live stream at the Frenzel Pianoforte. I hope very much that the sound issues we had last week have been solved now and that you all hear me very well, loud and clear. So let me know in the comment section if you have still issues, or if you witnessed issues with the sound. Hope not. Anja is in the chat, and as I've seen Emmy going in and Christopher and Tiref wishing her happy birthday, and it is today her birthday, so how cool is that I can live stream on Anja's or my wife's birthday. So today we're going to dive again into the Beethoven Adagio that went quite wrong, I would say, last week. Thank you to these technical issues we had. So it's a way too important piece not to do it again. And honestly, I see Anja writing sound is good. Okay, that's fine. That's great, actually. Thomas here, theoretical musical. Okay, great. So this is a way too important part of Beethoven's work not to do it again. And honestly, I will need some more time. So to really have this piece in my blood, so to say, so in my system. What I'm going to do is just play the piece as it is right now, and then we go through the piece and discuss some issues and discuss some ideas and thoughts and maybe things that we should work on in the future. I am obviously inspired, so to say, by the metronome number indications, or the tempo indications, in fact, you could say, by Czerny and Moschles. Those are the prime sources that we have, though there are other metronome numbers or tempo indications, because basically that is what the metronome number is all about. So, and they're all in the same range. I'm not checking now right before I start, so I just play the piece from what I think it could be right now, and then later on, when I just played the first time, we go and dive into the music a little bit more and see what we can learn and what we can do to improve the piece, because again, this is a practicing session. This is not finished. Slow movements, the adagios, regardless what tempo choice you make, they're always very difficult. Okay. If that's okay with you, then we go ahead. I will not mute this microphone, which I should, for the best sound of the piano, because I don't want to touch anything now. Hope it's still functioning as we speak, and so let things as it is. So I'm not touching anything at all. But it can be that this microphone is coloring the piano sound, not in favor of the sound of the piano, but so be it. So there we go. Beethoven Adagio, first piano sonata in F minor, and the Adagio is in F major. Let's see how it sounds. I'm using a little bit more pedal than is indicated, but more on that later. Okay, that was one version of it, and as I said, it's not finished, this piece yet, and I'm going to go together with you in detail what we can actually do and how I continue now practicing. By the way, if you hear this ticking noise, it's not the rain, but it's Anja typing and answering her birthday wishes. But because we had last week so many sound issues, she's wearing headphones, so she doesn't hear herself typing. So it was even harder, Anja, to keep up with this tempo. No, just kidding. So, but I think the Neumann microphones will have picked that up. So in case you wonder, that's just Anja working on her desk and typing the comment section. Okay. Um, so, to summarize the history of this piece, regarding my performance of, my perspective on this piece, I've recorded this the first time 2 or 3 years ago on clavichord. This sonata still works very well on clavichord, though the last movement a little bit less. But anyway, I think it's very much possible. 1794, 95. So remember, this is all 18th century music. A lot of times we apply a kind of 19th century sticker, so to say, on Beethoven's music, but the majority of his sonatas was composed in the 18th century still. And to give you just one perspective here, when Beethoven was studying with Haydn, so exactly in this period, because this is the first of 3 sonatas that were dedicated to Haydn. Haydn in 1794 bought a large 5-octave unfretted clavichord, not his first one. So even that late in 18th century, it's for people who are not familiar with the clavichord, it's sometimes surprising for them to realize that the clavichord was present in the households and in the composer's room, like Haydn and Beethoven had the clavichord, Mozart for sure, until the end of his life, that it still was so much present. But if you go to that recording, which is still on YouTube, and it will remain there, this middle section will be a lot faster. So the awareness, so to say, for myself, that also the middle movements, or let me rephrase that, if you take a double beat approach for the fast movements, then you also have to apply that to the middle movements. There's actually nothing that supports an idea like Talsma in the 80s, where you have this variable use of the metronome. That's something that's actually not documented at all, I would say. And so at early 2017, right after I recorded the Bach partitas, those will be released, by the way, in a few months on CD and vinyl, but we'll talk about it in another video. Then I recorded the Mozart Munich sonatas, and I've shared this story, but if you don't know that, if you've not heard it before, it's important. So there I practiced these sonatas, and you have the D major one with the beautiful variations, where you have also this one of Mozart's, from his younger work, magnificent elaborated Adagio. So I finished practicing that, and in that time I was not dealing with metronome numbers in the way I was doing it now. So I was kind of inspired by it, but my main approach was from the notation, from the Baroque music, as I still do a lot. But that moment changed, because there I checked the motionless tempo for that Mozart sonata, and to my surprise my performance was about, if not exact, half of the tempo motionless indicated. So I again took contact with Lorenz Gardient. We were doing a lot of research together, and he was always very patient on this, but we had some long discussions, positive discussions, but he accepted the fact that I didn't follow him on this field. And so I contacted him again. He was here. We made then that famous ping pong video that we released, and in fact have almost 200,000 views, I think, right now. But I realized that I needed to go further than this. So further than just doing something with the middle movements that's neither single or double beat. And so my journey, real tempo journey, started there, and this is a direct consequence of that, since this is the first time that I approach this Adagio section, this Adagio movement, from that perspective. And to be completely open with you, it's sometimes remarkable how easy it is to apply double beat for slow movements. You hear people often say, for slow movements, it doesn't work at all. Well, the same problematic. So the things that are problematic for fast movements, they apply one-to-one to slow movements as well. So a lot of slow movements actually become rather, I would sometimes even unplayable, or it doesn't make any sense. Talking on that Mozart Adagio, you have turns and ornamentation on 30-second notes, which would go in a tempo, I believe, of 8 note 100. So that doesn't make sense if it is still possible. But in some cases, you run into a situation where you say, well, here I have to reflect. This adagio is a little bit in between. You have instances where you say, well, this makes sense. For instance, if you have these 30-second notes, you can really let them sing. But you have other places where at first it feels to be very, very slow, like here. And so the biggest challenge in performance practice, because it's about performance practice, we have to fix things. If people say, well, taking a metronome number on itself is a kind of lack of inspiration, which isn't true at all, because what you do as a musician is you create a kind of unity around what you're doing. You're making an interpretation. We are the chain, I would say, the one part that is between Beethoven and our audience. So we have to translate what's here written in note to our audiences, and you have to find a balance. Tempo is a really important part of that. So everything is built on the movement you choose, your articulation, your phrasing, your dynamics, everything. So if you change that, if you take out a layer of tempo and you insert another tempo that's basically given by someone else, in this case Moschles or Czerny, that's not easy at all, because everything else changes. And I've learned that if you or yourself wonder sometimes about, well, this doesn't make sense or it doesn't feel right, it's the language. It's always the language. There's always something that you don't see down. It's part of accentuation. Accentuation is extremely important in this new way of language, new way of playing. But certainly if you then go into pieces which are a little bit slower, or where you have the feeling the music just comes to a halt, stands still, then sometimes you start to doubt, and that's applicable to me as well. Before we go into detail regarding tempo and share some thoughts here, I should say the most important thing that I've learned during the last months or year perhaps is to compare or to imagine that in this time everything a keyboard composer does is related to singing. So as with an organ or with a clavichord or with any kind of keyboard instrument, we imitate other instruments, or in the best case I would say singing, but that's a huge competition, because a singer can make, of course, out of one note a crescendo or decrescendo, so leading you gently as a listener to the next note. We have to make a suggestion of that, and we do that by timing and accentuation. But if you keep that in mind, that we are, as keyboard players, and certainly in this kind of music, actually imitating an opera singer who's on stage and expressing his most intimate thoughts, because that's what it is about, mostly an adagio about, then suddenly it's changed. If you just see the beginning of this piece as a keyboard piece, so where you have this high A, or high A, this A, and not feel the continuation of notes without having the urge to push them, then there is something missing. But if you listen to this music from the perspective that there is an opera singer making a story, then suddenly everything changes. It's very, very serious. And in one way or another, diving more and more into these slower movements, I think that if we have lost one part of that music in that time, one feeling, one mood, so to say, it's the effect, it's the mood that applies to these adagios. If we listen to that music now, we hear most adagios, as I believe, or I think, as andantes. And so typically these movements become a kind of parts between the faster parts. I know that's something we don't like to say on Beethoven, about Beethoven's music, but sometimes, also for Mozart, you hear people say, well, it's just an in-between, the slow movements for the larger parts, the fast parts, but that's actually the opposite is true. It are the adagios who were considered the most difficult, the movements that were actually destined for the smaller circle of audiences, for the Kenner und Liebhaber, like the Germans say. And they are difficult. So now, on the interpretation and why this is difficult for me, and I guess for a lot of you, if you just dive in, is to find a certain confidence in the movement. I'm going to take my metronome here. Well, there is this 19th century metronome, but it's perfect, but I don't like playing with that hard ticking. So this is actually great to have this digital metronome. So we have basically a few tempi, but the most important ones are by Czerny and Moscheles. Both have known Beethoven and both have in their editions expressed the wish to come as close as possible to what they remember Beethoven's playing was. But in any way, it's what the most important thing we can take from this is that it's our Moscheles and Czerny's tempi. By the way, I'm playing here from this. This is the last edition that Czerny made. He made 4 complete editions of Beethoven, and this one contains his fingerings and some of his metronome marks that are different from his earlier one. So he was of course, he was a living musician. Moscheles was rather consistent in this metronomization. So Czerny gives 84, and Moscheles gives quarter note 50. So I'm going to check what my tempo was now. I think it's somewhere in between, and that's perfectly possible. So 8th note 84 or quarter note 50, 8th note 100, that seems to be a different tempo, but it's in the same family. It gives a different character. Let's try both tempi and see what we like most. So when I'm experimenting with this, the tendency goes for me towards the slower versions, towards Czerny. So let's just see what Czerny is. I play a few bars randomly from the beginning and from the middle section. You'll see. So that's fairly my tempo. And this part, beautiful, kind of mystery here. Also, this is a kind of place where you can have the feeling at first this goes really slow, but then when we come back to that, listen to the effect that you are generating. Or here. So that is Czerny. Let's now stay on the 8th note version. I think modulus quarter note 50 makes sense as the 8th note version of the metronome number makes sense. So what I think the difference is that if you're practicing, you really need this 16th note count, because then you have the feeling that that's how the music moves. That's the, you know, that's been a time, but I used to speak about the metrical movement. That's nothing to do with the metronome, but where you have the tension from one count to the other just by the force that the note or the count itself gives. So you have heavy, light, heavy, light, and not like pushing two over these counts over the bar. That's easier when you count in 16th notes in such an adagio, which is elaborated here with 32nd notes. That's more difficult if you just have the slow beat of the 8th note. But eventually, I would say the most freedom you get in playing and performing is when you take the slower pulse, because then everything happens within this unity of pulse. We're going to demonstrate it, perhaps not today, but certainly in another session, because we're going to come back on this adagio a few more times. So this is 100. So now I was talking too much, so let's just give you a short idea of what Czerny's tempo was. I like the seriousness of this. It's very introvert. Modulus is much more, well, more extrovert. So here we go. Or here. So it's a different piece, though the tempo differences, maybe Czerny's at the slowest side, I don't know. Modulus maybe at the faster side. I have sometimes a feeling that he is entering this tempo more kind of andante ma non troppo. But it works. So this kind of works as well, though as I said, I have the feeling it's a little bit too fast. If you go then at the end, and so on. So this is double beat. If you would play this in single beat, it would be a tempo like. Yeah, whether that's an adagio or not, that's a nonsense discussion because we don't know. We weren't there when people played this. This is still kind of playable, though it would be very fast with this 30-second noise. But you lose a lot of this deep expression. So that's just and again, you cannot say, well, we don't apply it for the slow movements, and we do apply it for the fast movements. There is not an indication for that. Okay, so how to continue with this to practice? That's a very good question that I ask myself, but I guess you have the same question. So this is something that really needs time to feel, to learn to feel what this music is about. And it's all in the details. You have the slurs here. And so Czerny is a really important addition. Let me see if I can show you that. That's too much light. But anyway, you have the slurs. You have endings of slurs. And endings of slurs, I need to be careful with this score, means actually always a kind of articulation gap, which is something we are not used to do anymore, always. Like for instance, G sharp, end of the slur, then the A. So how to do that gentle? Yeah, I do have the feeling, I do have the urge to make it over legato. So those are things that I am still figuring out. At the end you make a decision, of course, but it's just too much fun to think about it. Also here. End of the slur. Slur. Again, articulation. Articulation. Same. So of course it's not an idea to chop all these parts into little parts. Then you should build a kind of unity. But on the clavichord that's way more easy because you have so many shades of releases. Gentle, whatever you do on the touch, you can make an articulation gap by basically doing nothing. On the piano that's much harder. Everything is bigger on the piano. And so that's partly the reason why I use more pedal here than indicated. Not knowing if that's okay, quote unquote. I mean, we are entitled to do whatever we want. But it's possible, I would say, and highly likable that in that time, I have to be careful what I'm saying now because I don't know for 100% sure, and you should know that. But I think as I'm reading things now, that if pedal is not indicated, we might first consider of not using it, which gives a lot of problems, I can tell you. Certainly, if you combine that with fingering like this of Czerny, where he indicates substitutions, so keeping the same note but changing the fingers, and not indicating it, obviously where he doesn't want you to have it. So also fingering is one of those domains that we see as an individual decision, which it is. I mean, the impact of fingering on interpretation is larger than most of us really recognize. But in that time, this fingering of Czerny, if you would have be a student of his, you would have to take his fingering seriously, because it has an impact on how he wants the piece to be played. So in combination with the lack of use of sustaining pedal, this becomes even more bigger and more challenging, because there is nothing to cover up for any detail. Also here. So this is one slur, 3 notes. You can play them right in time. But then this F comes so incredibly naked, I would say. Let's check my tempo. That's something I do regularly when I'm practicing, so that I feel. And here you really have to feel the 8th notes. Tom, tom, tom. So how much importance is this F worth? And then Beethoven doesn't write 2 8th notes. He writes F as an 8th note and C as a 16th note with a 16th rest, which means that the C, already shortened by the end of the bow, because the last note of a bow, we learn that still today in piano class, but it is an historical tradition, should be shortened with half. Beethoven is doing that already with changing the 8th note into a 16th note, and then again on top of that writing this bow. So should we approach that C as if there was a dot on top of it or not? So those are all questions that you have to solve. What I think here is that he wants to have a very strong accent in timing, perhaps more than in dynamics, on the first note. And you have this so that make it a little bit, timing is of the essence here. So that this one bar becomes something really special. And again, that's much easier on the clavichord, because there you have this infinitive changes, dynamic changes that you can make. I can, with no problem, play the C on the clavichord here and make the B flat as soft as I possibly want to have it. On the pianoforte, on this kind of action, not possible. You can be lucky, but the hammerhead needs to have a certain speed in order to make sound. Actually, Czerny is describing that very clearly in one of his publications. I think in the letters he sent to a young lady, so a young student, a virtual. I mean, he made it up, but there he said you cannot play too soft on the pianoforte because you need to have a good, firm sound. So this is, of course, in the piano range here. Then going softer, difficult. So timing is of the essence here. See, it's no sound at all. And then this sentence comes to an end naturally. But then the quarter note and then keep the same mood, the same feeling. Very serious. Breathing. This is launching an idea of and suddenly, I don't know if you feel the same, but here has been said a lot. And so breathing and then continuing with elaborating on the story. Anyways, these are big feelings of life. That's what it is about. And so these adagios by no means can be a kind of light, pleasant pieces that just have a light story. They are very, very deep. I once was in, when we returned last year from our yearly holiday in the north of Holland, we stopped in Groningen. There is a fabulous museum, and you have there these paintings of, I'm so bad at remembering names, of these early 19th century painters. And so you have these landscapes of water and the moon only, so complete um, deep feelings of loneliness, which those composers actually made music for. That was the romantic feeling. So here you have this very serious thoughts. Every note should be in the right context. So also here, and then breathing, just climbing up. Something that happened in the past, maybe a memory. Very tender. Not too fast this turn. And I'm talking to you as if I know everything what I'm doing, but I'm just talking to myself basically. And then you come to this wonderful moment here where he elaborates with the 16th note. But you come to a halt again here on this, one of the most beautiful chords, certainly in the context of a piece ever written here. And then accentuation here, articulation. And that's the feeling you have when watching to when looking to such a painting, where there is nothing that can disturb this eternal rest, this peace that we might have lost in our time. And this is coming back in such an incredibly great manner. Remember, 1795, he was so young still. Totally unexpected. And then big feelings on opera stage. Coloratura. Give freedom to the solo singer. And so make a few additions if you want. That's perfectly fine, I think, in that music. Even C.P. Bach writes, when you have long notes, we cannot do the same as a violin player or a singer, Immanuel Bach writes. So elaborate on those notes, make them work. And so the question is, how many of these notes in these pieces should be elaborated on, and how many not? Okay, it's 10 to 6 here in Belgium, and I hope this all makes sense. So let me just have a look at the chat if there is something on your mind. And as I said, we definitely come back to this, the camera's over there, come back to this Beethoven piece. This whole sonata is really, really mind-blowing. Yeah, well, every sonata is. And so, yeah, that's maybe the official start of the Beethoven project. I think Jonathan was asking last time about when does it start. It has already started. So that's a 10 years project. Okay. Let me just have the chat here on top of my screen. As I said, I'm very scared to touch something. You will not believe what happened right before we started. So I'm using back again OBS, Open Broadcasting Software. It's open source. Last week I was using vMix, which should be better, but quote unquote. But OBS crashed 10 minutes before the live stream, before we went live. And so was keeping my cool. Anja can confirm that, but yeah, it's nothing you can do. It's to do with my computer, I don't know. So anyway, we are here. So I just go a little bit back in time on the chat. And I see whoever I can see. John is here, also always great to see him. Let me just take the camera, this microphone here. Bet Stuba. Andrea Campana, great to have you here again. It's nice also to see you here in the chat. It's like a community on itself. Roman Gerasimov. Win what you tweet. Anja is saying something to me. Anja?
In the last, there are questions.
Okay, she said that there are questions written at the end, so. Anja says she's an accountant. I'm lucky she is, because I don't know anything about those things. Anja does sing, by the way, Doug, but not often. She's a little bit shy.
I'm going to write it down.
I'm just reading what you've written now. Okay, okay. Okay, John asked the question that Roman asked, and he is much more into these electronic pianos than I am, so he has a great one. Kenneth is here. Pedro Martins, music. Wim, I have a weird question. Can you read organ, keyboard, tablature? No, I can't. And I've always wanted to dive into that because at conservatory we had some people who could do that and rather easily, and it appears not to be too difficult, but I've never given. I was too lazy, I guess. I've always have had this kind of. I think it's very important that there are urtext editions, but I've always have this kind of feeling that, well, they're out there, but that one note that's changing will not change the interpretation completely, but it's information. And by the way, I'll not elaborate on urtext, but it's complicated matter on its own to make it, because this edition by Czerny, which is weird, is not being reprinted. It's even not available online. A few are. I desperately would like to have the complete Czerny, and actually the idea is to reprint it myself. But that gives also an idea on how we treat history. As again, those urtext editions, they are so necessary, but it's an ongoing thing. There is not something like the end result of the urtext. You could say this Czerny edition, it has some flaws, some misprints, not many, I think, but that's so worthwhile information. It's prime source information. I mean, Czerny knew Beethoven. None of us who would make an urtext edition has known Beethoven, so it's really complicated. So, but I cannot read the tablatura to answer a question. The Black Hat, when's the black pianoforte coming to our house? Next week. Anyway, it's going to be finished this week, and so we are excited. My Irar will have to move for a while to the place where we sit, so it will be very crowded here in-house until the studio is finished. No more clicking, Doug said. Well, yes, I'm in conversation with vMix. They're very, very good support service, I guess. David asked, hi Wim, quick question, long or short appoggiatura in the first bar? You play a short one, but would a long one make sense? Many thanks. Well, that's an excellent question, and don't take my answer as 100% truth. I'm sorry, but I believe that this is a short appoggiatura, but short in the original understanding. So I I will make some videos on Mozart alla Turca. They are waiting for a long time. I want to re-record that piece and also make the context of the Janitsharenmars, the Janitsaren soldiers. But anyway, if you have this kind of short appoggiatura is actually a one that we invented. There is not really a description of an appoggiatura like this. Not going to go too much in detail. A short appoggiatura is actually a short as possible grace note. Hope that's correct, but on the beat, unaccentuated. And if you read Neumann, for instance, that's a great source in reading Bach ornamentation. I've used that book a lot. Also, he wrote a book on Mozart ornamentation. He says literally that's not possible, so it cannot be done like that. It always naturally comes before the beat, but that's not what you read in the historical sources, and I'm puzzled by that as well. In a slow movement, however, you can do that because I play the C in the right hand together with the D. Well, I give the D a little bit of advantage, like in 18th century practice, so a little bit arpeggiato. But if you were to do it on the beat, the tam, you create this weird thing, the tam, that's different than tram. The tam, you have a kind of vacuum that you create on the first beat, and in fast movements it's really difficult. I haven't figured out how to do that. I think in Beethoven's time things are changing, that these short appoggiaturas are the ones that are written in ornamentation and the long ones are written out, but I'm not sure about that. I should dive more into that. It's a really complex thing. Whereas in Mozart's time you had the opposite. Long appoggiaturas were actually written as ornaments, and the short ones sometimes are written out in ornamentation or in full. We have some examples, but I cannot play them from memory. But anyway, Leopold Mozart comments on that. He says, why not just turn the things around? This stupid habit of writing in ornamentation something that you couldn't write in full normal note value system, and just indicate the short appoggiaturas or the short ornaments as ornamentation. But again, that's something, don't take my word as 100% for it, but that's my idea. That's really complicated, ornamentation. So, and John is advising people on the best electronical piano, which sometimes is important to have. Okay, and Anja's coming down.
No,
She's not coming down, but I don't.
Batstuba became a patron.
Oh, Batstuba became a patron. Thank you so much. Oh, he writes it. That's so great. Thank you. Thanks to Wim. Thanks to you, Wim, I started to enjoy more Beethoven and became patron today. Well, thumbs up for that. And patrons are the backbone of what we do. I say that a lot. We had a patron call, a hangout a few days ago, and we were with around 9 to 10 people, which is nice. I mean, we're going to have we have monthly calls, and those sessions are actually great. We'll try to organize them a little bit better and more structured in the way that people that have questions or just want to share something. That's all possible in those hangouts. It's really great. So because if you are a YouTube creator, so to say, as we are, you sometimes think, well, there's a camera and we are talking now live, which is great. I can see it in the chat, but often, if I record the video, I'm talking to a camera. Always imagine that you are there, because otherwise it would feel very weird. But still, patrons are there to say, hey, we want you to continue. That's actually basically the main message I get from them. And we are now 86, 87, thanks to Batstuba. So that's great. Thank you. Let's see. We have some minutes left because it's 6 o'clock. I'm going to end because it's Anja's birthday and we are going to eat French fries. Of course, we are in Belgium, and I think I'm going to drink a Belgian beer. I'm not sure of that. Normally I have one a week. And then we're going to make some family moments here. Pedro Martin's music. Have you ever thought about composing your own pieces? No, never. And I have a weird brain, I think. I can figure out things once they are written, but I cannot come up with them. I'm not a very good improviser either. That's a little bit to my I'm a little bit not frustrated, but I would love to improvise better. Sometimes I can do some ornaments in pieces, but that's actually, and I'm not practicing it enough. We have a great friend Kostas, who is living in Greece, who is a really great talent. I should do more of his music because there's a lot of music waiting. Okay, guys, I thank you for being here. And as always, these sessions, they are gold for me. I can tell you this Monday now. Last week was really terrible. I mean, I had a great week. But a lot of meetings outside the house with our organ project in Leuven, that's really taking off. And so they needed me a lot of times. I had to prepare reports for meetings, correct them. So a lot of administration work behind my desk, which is necessary sometimes. But when I have planned a live stream, I switch my phones off. Everything in the house is in function of practicing. And in this hour, basically by talking to you and myself, I have learned so much. So that's always with these sessions. So on Thursday, at the clavichord, back with the Symphonias of Bach, which I really fell in love with again. So that will be our next big project on Bach. The World Temperate Clavier has to wait a little bit until that is finished. I will prepare the fingerings up front now, because last week we had a session where I went through the piece making fingerings, and I will start practicing at the beginning of the session, and so we'll see where we end there. Okay, thanks for being here. Thanks for subscribing if you haven't already, and I see you very soon again. Bye.